Welcome to the How to Effectively Peer Review workshop, brought to you by the Writing Center at the Academic Resource Center. So, how can peer review help? Peer review provides a fresh pair of eyes for your paper. Everyone already has their own perspectives and their own experiences with writing. So, getting someone else's feedback can help the writer think of additional ideas that might strengthen their paper. In addition, an extra pair of eyes catches grammatical or punctuation errors, right? And it can provide advice on what can be avoided. The best benefit of peer review is that when you perform peer review on someone else's paper, it also can spark information on how you can improve your own writing. So, when you're doing a peer review, what should you look for? So, you're going to give feedback on an academic paper. You must first understand certain things about the assignment. Usually, this is going to be in your assignment rubric, or if you're in class, your professor might give you a copy of the assignment rubric or have specific things that they want you to look at. But in general, you're going to look at what is the assignment, where is the thesis statement, and how well it's developed, and what are the main points. So when you look at the assignment, you're going to look at the assignment even before you begin reading the paper. This is going to be true even if you're in the same class with someone, because this is going to refresh your memory as far as what are the expectations of the assignment. If you're doing peer review for someone else, even as a favor, you want to make sure that you know what the assignment is. Next, you're going to want to look at their thesis statement. So first you have to think about a thesis statement is the driving force of the paper, right? You look at your rubric and your assignment guidelines to you remind yourself what kind of thesis it should be. Note that, when you refer to the rubric, many professors have outlined the components they expect to see in a thesis, right? But in general, your thesis statement is going to hold three components: the purpose or stance, cause or reasons, effects, outcomes, or importance. The conclusion. The conclusion of any essay is the last thought that the reader is going to be left with, and it should readdress their argument, their purpose, or their stance, right? Your conclusion also needs to address the thesis statement, meaning that you're restating the theses using different words. The conclusion should summarize the main points that have been made in the paper, and a good conclusion ends and gives the reader something to take away from what they have read. So now when you're thinking about the main points in the body paragraphs, so when you look at the main points of the body paragraph, you want to look and make sure that the body paragraphs relate back to the theses or that driving force of the paper, and that the body paragraphs are organized. So if your thesis states that things you're going to talk about point A, B, and C, then in the body paragraphs, you will first see that the student has written about A, then B, and C. And this is important when you're doing the peer review, that you make sure that you also look over the organization of the paper. The body paragraphs are always going to circle back around to the theses, right? And you can have a concluding sentence at the end that wraps the paragraph up and connects it back as well, right? This is something that's very important for American academic English. Proofreading. Proofreading is a human activity. And think about it. When you're doing a peer review, you are looking over a paper, but a peer review is not a proofreading exercise. A peer review is very evaluative. If you're proofreading, you might just be looking for typos and spelling and grammar. But when you're peer reviewing, you're looking to make sure that the students follow their assignment guidelines, that they have a coherent theses, that the body paragraphs relate back to the theses and they have sufficient evidence. You're making sure that if there's any in-text citations, that they are correctly noted, right? And that the format of the paper and all of that is a little bit more than a proofing program that's on the computer that underlines, red marks of where you might have something misspelled. So when you think about doing a peer review, think about this higher order triangle, right? So the widest part of the triangle is here at the bottom where it says you understand the assignment, right? So that means that it's wide because you're putting a lot of effort into that. Then you're looking for that factual content, right? That's included in your body paragraphs and making sure that there's interpretation and analysis and in-text citations, right? And is quoted and it is logical and it is consistent and it is coherent, right? Then you're looking at the organization. And of course, that takes you back to your assignment guidelines and rubric to make sure that the organization is what the teachers expected, right? If it's supposed to be formatted in an MLA style, that you have the right format, right? Are things being presented in a logical order? If the thesis is stated and it's A, B, and C is the organization of the essay, therefore address points A, B, and C, right? Then you're looking at flow, right? And flow really relates a lot to transitions, right? Wondering whether or not the introduction prepares the reader for what you're about to read, because your introduction is giving that hook and that background information, and then your theses, right? And does the information flow together, or are you looking up and you're reading and then all of a sudden there's a paragraph that's like, wait, what is this? All right, okay, so you look at flow. Then notice we're getting smaller and you might start to look at style, right? Well, how is the style? Is there a lot of passive words? Are there active verbs? Or what's going on here? Because, everyone has their own style. People have their own style and not realize that they even have a style, but you still have a style. And when you're looking at a student's paper, maybe you might want to say, look, you have a lot, the passive voice is very strong here. However, this is an argumentative paper, and so we might want to have more definitive statements that you're making. Then, notice how we're getting closer to the top? We're looking at grammar, right? The main thing with grammar, right, is to make sure that you have subject-verb agreement, right? That becomes a big thing where students might forget to do that. And look at, commas and punctuations and maybe a few things of word choice. But notice how the amount that we are spending in grammar is so much smaller than the amount that we are as far as understanding the assignment, making sure that it has the factual content or in the organization, right? And then finally, you look for small errors, typos. So that when you're doing a peer review, you don't want to start looking for typos and then come down to the bottom. You want to start understanding the assignment, making sure that the components of the assignment are put there and that it has evidence and analysis and that it is organized and in keeping with the assignment guidelines. And then there's a small effort to make sure everything is spelled right and that there's typos, right? This is the smaller part because any writing assignment is mainly about the information, and word processing programs and have a tendency to kind of underline if a word is misspelled anyway. You could use that for errors, but you certainly cannot use that when it comes to dealing with organization, the content, and understanding the assignment. Well, if you have any additional questions or concerns, please feel free to visit us here at the Academic Resource Center. Thank you so much for attending this workshop.